Have you ever held a deceased loved one's possession and felt an overwhelming wave of their presence wash over you? That heart-stopping moment when time freezes, and you could swear they were standing right beside you, if only for a heartbeat. In homes touched by loss, drawers remain untouched, filled with precious memories, a father's weathered watch, a mother's cherished ring, a child's favorite toy. We keep these treasures close, believing they maintain our connection to those we've lost. But what if Padre Pio revealed that these very objects could be creating invisible chains, binding both us and the souls of our departed loved ones? Today, I must share a profound revelation from Padre Pio that challenges everything we believe about keeping possessions of the deceased. This mystical saint, blessed with extraordinary spiritual gifts and divine wisdom, understood a truth about these objects that few dare to discuss. A truth that might explain those unexplained waves of sadness, those recurring nightmares, or that inexplicable heaviness lingering in certain rooms of your home. I know this touches the deepest wounds of your heart. As someone who once transformed an entire room into a shrine of my grandmother's belongings, I intimately understand the gut-wrenching pain that comes with even thinking about letting go. But what Padre Pio discovered about these objects is too crucial to ignore, especially if you've been experiencing unusual emotional or spiritual disturbances in your living space. Before sharing this warning, one that has brought profound healing to countless grieving families, I want you to know this message comes from a place of deep understanding and compassion. What you're about to learn isn't about erasing precious memories or dishonoring those who've crossed over. Instead, it reveals something far more powerful, the path to true spiritual liberation. If you've ever wondered why certain areas of your home feel heavier than others, or why memories of your loved ones sometimes bring more anguish than peace, stay with me. Padre Pio's insights about the hidden spiritual impact of keeping these objects might be exactly what your soul has been yearning to hear. For those who type, "I need spiritual freedom" in the comments, I'll share a special prayer that Padre Pio himself prescribed for finding peace in the process of letting go. The truth about these objects runs deeper than most spiritual advisors dare to venture. It touches the very essence of how our physical world intertwines with the spiritual realm. And what Padre Pio uncovered about this connection transformed the lives of those brave enough to listen. What Padre Pio understood about physical objects went far beyond conventional wisdom. In his years of spiritual counseling, he witnessed countless cases where seemingly innocent keepsakes became conduits for unexplained spiritual phenomena. Objects, he would often say, carry more than just memories. They hold spiritual imprints that can affect both the living and the departed. Through his mystical gifts, Padre Pio could see how certain possessions created invisible bonds, like spiritual anchors that kept souls tethered to earthly concerns. He observed how a mother's wedding ring, carefully preserved in a jewelry box, could become a source of restless nights and unexplained anxiety. Or how a father's favorite chair, left untouched since his passing, could create a pocket of heavy energy that affected everyone in the household. In one particularly revealing case, a woman came to Padre Pio in deep distress. For 3 years after her husband's death, she had preserved his study exactly as he left it. His glasses still on the desk, his slippers by the chair, his pipe in its stand. She suffered from recurring dreams where she saw him sitting there, unable to leave. When Padre Pio visited her home in bilocation, he witnessed something profound, a visible cord of energy connecting these objects to her husband's soul, preventing his complete transition to the spiritual realm. These objects, Padre Pio explained, can become like spiritual anchors, binding both the living and the dead to a moment in time that should have passed. When we refuse to let go of these physical connections, we unknowingly create barriers to divine grace and healing. The science of energy and matter tells us that everything in our physical world carries a vibration. But Padre Pio's insights went deeper, revealing how objects associated with death or intense grief can create what he called emotional portals, points where the material and spiritual worlds intersect in ways that aren't always beneficial for either realm. Consider the testimony of Maria, whose mother had passed away 5 years ago. She had converted an entire room into a shrine, keeping everything from her mother's clothes to her daily items untouched. I thought I was honoring her memory, Maria shared, but after following Padre Pio's guidance about letting go, I realized I was actually preventing both of us from finding peace. The nightmares stopped, and for the first time, I felt my mother's presence in my heart instead of desperately searching for it in her things. Padre Pio identified specific warning signs that indicate when kept possessions are causing spiritual disturbance. Through his profound mystical insights, he observed patterns in homes where objects of the deceased created what he called spiritual stagnation. The first and most common sign manifests in your dreams, or when the departed appear repeatedly in the same setting, surrounded by their earthly possessions. Padre Pio warned, they're often showing us they're bound to these objects. He spoke of a businessman who kept his deceased father's office untouched. Night after night, he dreamed of his father sitting at the desk, endlessly shuffling papers, unable to rest. Physical symptoms often accompany these spiritual attachments. Many report unexplained fatigue when entering rooms filled with a departed loved one's belongings. Others experience sudden temperature drops, shortness of breath, or an overwhelming sense of melancholy. These sensations, Padre Pio explained, are our body's way of detecting spiritual discord. A particularly moving case involved a young widow who kept her husband's workshop exactly as he left it. Every tool, every unfinished project remained in place, she told Padre Pio. Oh, but lately, I hear sounds from that room at night, like he's still working there. The saint's response was gentle but firm. Your husband's soul yearns for progress, not preservation. These objects have become chains, not cherished memories. The emotional signs are equally telling. When memories of the deceased bring more pain than peace, when thinking of them always leads back to specific objects rather than the essence of who they were, these are indicators of unhealthy attachment. True memory, Padre Pio taught, resides in the heart, not in earthly possessions. Perhaps most concerning are the spiritual consequences. Those who maintain these strong attachments often report feeling stuck in their grief, unable to move forward. Prayer becomes difficult, as if an invisible barrier stands between them and divine comfort. The soul knows when it's time to let go, Padre Pio observed, but the mind often refuses to listen. Yet it's not just the living who suffer. Through his gift of spiritual sight, Padre Pio witnessed how departed souls sometimes lingered near their preserved possessions, their spiritual journey delayed by our unwillingness to release them. Every object kept in grief, he cautioned, can become a thread in a web that entangles both worlds. The Catholic Church's teachings on material possessions and their relationship to the deceased reveal profound spiritual truths that echo Padre Pio's warnings. Throughout centuries of spiritual wisdom, the Church has consistently taught that our connection to departed souls should be rooted in prayer and spiritual communion, not in physical objects. St. Augustine, addressing the faithful who struggled with grief, wrote, "The dead are not lost to us. They are merely residing in a different room of our Father's house." This powerful metaphor reminds us that our true connection transcends physical possessions. The Church emphasizes that while remembrance is sacred, attachment to material objects can become a form of spiritual imprisonment. In his pastoral work, Padre Pio often referenced scripture to explain this delicate balance. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Matthew 6:21 became a cornerstone of his counseling to those struggling with letting go. He explained how this verse applies not just to wealth, but to any material possession that captures our spiritual attention and energy. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that our prayers and sacrifices can benefit the deceased far more than preserving their earthly possessions. The souls of the faithful departed find their peace not in what they left behind, Padre Pio would explain, but in the prayers and masses offered for their eternal rest. A particularly moving example came from a family who kept their daughter's room unchanged for 7 years after her passing. During a spiritual consultation, Padre Pio revealed how their well-intentioned preservation was actually creating what he called a spiritual vacuum. He explained that while the Church honors remembrance, it teaches that our focus should be on aiding the soul's journey through prayer and charitable works in their memory. The theological foundation for this understanding comes from the Church's teaching about the communion of saints, the spiritual bond that unites the faithful on earth with those in purgatory and heaven. This communion, Padre Pio taught, is strengthened not by holding on to physical objects, but by releasing them in favor of spiritual connections through prayer and the sacraments. As we explore these profound truths about spiritual liberation, many of you have asked for deeper guidance on this delicate journey. Through prayer and careful study of Padre Pio's teachings, we've created something special, a comprehensive guide called The Spiritual Secrets of Padre Pio, A Path to Freedom. This sacred resource includes Padre Pio's most powerful prayers for emotional healing, his step-by-step guidance for releasing material attachments, and profound insights about connecting with loved ones in heaven. Each chapter contains real stories of transformation, practical exercises, and spiritual meditations designed to support you through this journey. Most importantly, you'll discover Padre Pio's private teachings about maintaining spiritual connections while releasing physical bonds, wisdom that has never been shared before in this complete form. Click the link in the comments to access this life-changing guide. Remember, as Padre Pio often said, when we take one step toward heaven, heaven takes 10 steps toward us. Let this guide be your companion on the path to true spiritual freedom. In a profound moment of mystical insight, Padre Pio revealed the startling truth about objects left behind by the deceased. These possessions, he declared, can become spiritual anchors that bind souls to earth long after they should have begun their journey toward eternal peace. This revelation came after decades of witnessing the invisible bonds between the physical and spiritual realms. During a particularly memorable spiritual counseling session, Padre Pio encountered a woman who had preserved her son's room exactly as it was the day he passed. The saint's extraordinary gift of spiritual sight allowed him to witness something that would change our understanding forever. He saw streams of energy, like golden threads, connecting each preserved object to both the mother's heart and her son's soul. What you believe preserves his memory, Padre Pio told her gently, actually creates spiritual tethers that prevent both you and your son from moving forward. These objects have become more than memories. They've become spiritual prison bars. He explained how each carefully preserved item acted as a weight, pulling both the living and the departed back to a moment in time that should have been released to God's care. Through his mystical experiences, Padre Pio identified what he called zones of spiritual stagnation in homes where too many objects of the deceased were kept. These areas became like spiritual whirlpools, creating patterns of recurring emotional pain and preventing the natural flow of healing grace. He observed how souls of the departed would often linger near these collections of preserved possessions, unable to fully embrace their spiritual journey. The most powerful truth, Padre Pio emphasized, is that these objects can create a form of spiritual suspension where neither the living nor the dead can fully progress in their spiritual journey. He witnessed how preserved rooms became like spiritual time capsules, trapping grief and preventing the natural transformation of earthly love into its higher spiritual form. This revelation challenges our deepest instincts about preserving connections with those we've lost. But as Padre Pio explained, true love knows when to hold on and when to let go. The highest form of love for the departed is allowing them their complete freedom in Christ. Padre Pio provided specific guidance for those ready to release these spiritual bonds. His approach combines practical action with spiritual wisdom, ensuring both the living and the departed find peace in this process of letting go. The first step, he insisted, must always begin with prayer. Before touching any object, he counseled, spend time in prayer asking for divine strength and wisdom. He recommended this powerful prayer: Lord, grant me the strength to release what holds both me and my loved one bound to earth, so we may both grow closer to you. A grieving mother once asked Padre Pio how to start this difficult process. His response became a cornerstone of his teaching. Begin with the items that carry the heaviest emotional weight. These are usually the ones that bring tears to your eyes merely by looking at them. These objects hold the strongest spiritual ties. He outlined a three-stage process of release. First, gather the objects in one place and spend time in prayer over them. Second, select items of true sentimental value, but limit them to what fits in a small memory box. Finally, consider how the remaining items could bless others through charitable donation. The act of giving, Padre Pio explained, transforms the energy of grief into an energy of love and service. He shared how one family donated their deceased father's clothing to a homeless shelter, and in doing so, found their grief transformed into a sense of purpose and peace. For those struggling with guilt about letting go, Padre Pio offered this insight: your loved ones in heaven do not need these earthly possessions. What they desire most is your spiritual growth and freedom. He emphasized how each item released creates space for divine grace to enter and heal. The timing of this process is crucial. Move at the pace your heart can bear, he advised, but do not allow fear to prevent you from taking the first step. He suggested starting with smaller items before tackling spaces like preserved rooms or collections of personal effects. The profound transformation that occurs when we release objects of the deceased extends far beyond the physical realm. Padre Pio witnessed countless cases where this act of letting go initiated deep spiritual healing for both the living and the departed. Clara's testimony deeply moved our spiritual community. After losing her only son in a tragic accident, she kept his room untouched for 3 years. Every night, I'd go in there and sit on his bed, surrounded by his things, she shares, her voice trembling. The nightmares were getting worse. I kept seeing him trapped, unable to move on. After following Padre Pio's guidance, she began the process of releasing his possessions. The first night after donating his clothes to a youth shelter, something miraculous happened. I had a different dream. Instead of seeing my son trapped in his old room, I saw him in a beautiful garden, smiling and free. He thanked me for letting him go. That's when I knew keeping his things wasn't keeping him close. It was keeping both of us bound to earth. This transformation manifests in 3 distinct phases. First comes the physical lightening. Spaces that once felt heavy with grief begin to breathe again. Padre Pio described seeing spiritual light return to rooms where objects had been released, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. The second phase involves emotional liberation. Those who complete this process report a profound shift from painful longing to peaceful remembrance. A day when we stop seeking the departed in their possessions, Padre Pio explained, we begin to find them in the whispers of our prayers and the warmth of our memories. The final and most profound phase is spiritual reconnection. As material attachments dissolve, a purer spiritual bond emerges. Many report sensing their loved ones' presence more clearly after letting go of their possessions. The souls of the departed, Padre Pio revealed, can more easily send us signs of their love and peace when we're not fixated on their earthly belongings. The time has come for a profound decision, one that could transform both your spiritual journey and bring peace to those you've lost. Padre Pio's wisdom reveals that true healing begins with a single step of courage, a willingness to trust in something greater than physical connections. Think about the spaces in your home that hold these precious objects. Feel the weight they carry, not just physically, but spiritually. Now imagine those spaces filled with light, with peace, with the true essence of your loved one's memory, rather than the heaviness of material attachments. This journey of release isn't one you must walk alone. Our community of believers understands this sacred path. That's why I invite you to share your story below. Type "I choose freedom" in the comments if you're ready to begin this transformation. For each person who comments, I'll share Padre Pio's special prayer for spiritual liberation. Remember, every object released becomes a prayer answered. Every space cleared becomes room for divine grace. Your loved ones in heaven are cheering you on, waiting to connect with you in a deeper, more spiritual way. Consider this. What would your departed loved one want for you? To be bound by their possessions, or to be free to honor their memory through living fully? Padre Pio teaches us that true love knows when to release, when to transform earthly attachments into spiritual bonds. The choice you make today could be the key to unlocking not just your freedom, but also bringing peace to the soul of your loved one. Don't let another day pass in the shadow of these spiritual chains. Padre Pio's wisdom echoes through time with a truth that cannot be ignored. The strongest chains are often the ones we cannot see. Today, you've discovered how objects of the deceased can become these invisible chains, binding both the living and the departed to earth when their souls yearn for spiritual freedom. Think of the space in your home that holds these treasured possessions, that room you hesitate to enter, that box you can't bring yourself to open. Each object carries not just memories, but spiritual weight. Yet imagine those spaces filled with light instead of shadows, with peace instead of pain, with the true essence of your loved one's presence instead of the heavy energy of grief. The transformation begins with a simple prayer Padre Pio taught. Lord, grant me the strength to release what binds, the wisdom to understand your timing, and the courage to take this step toward freedom. Say this prayer each morning for 7 days before beginning the process of release. Start with something small, perhaps a single piece of clothing or a book. As you hold it, thank it for carrying the memory of your loved one. Then, consciously choose to transform this physical connection into a spiritual one. Consider donating it to someone in need, allowing the object to carry forward your loved one's legacy of love. Your loved ones in heaven are witnessing this journey. They see what you cannot, how these material bonds have become spiritual anchors. Through Padre Pio's insights, they're asking for release, for transformation, for the chance to connect with you in a deeper, more profound way. Remember the power of charitable giving in this process. Each item released with love creates a ripple of blessings. A coat warming someone in need, a book inspiring a new reader, a piece of furniture making a house feel like home. These transformations honor your loved one's memory in the most beautiful way. Write "I choose freedom" in the comments below and receive not just Padre Pio's powerful prayer for spiritual liberation, but also a daily guide for this sacred journey of release. Join our community of believers who are walking this path of transformation together. May God's grace illuminate your path as you move from material attachment to spiritual freedom. May each step bring you closer to the pure, unbound connection your heart truly seeks. And may Padre Pio's blessing guide you toward the peace that comes when love transcends the physical and embraces the eternal.